Hi, my name is Riert.
And my name is Viana. Welcome back to our podcast on the Fanie Botha Xtreme Challenge, Part 2. Last week, we covered the regular trail, Fanie Botha regular trail without the extreme option in Part 1 of our podcast on the Fanie Botha. Today, as promised, we're going to talk about the extreme option, including what it entails, what to expect of the trails, and also a little bit of background information about Summit X and the Fanie Botha Xtreme. As we mentioned last week, the Fanie Botha Xtreme is one of the main events on the annual calendar for Summit X. Now, just a little bit of background about Summit X. Summit X was established in 2022 as the Mpumalanga Summit Challenge. And during this year, there were 10 peaks that participants were required to summit in order to qualify for a gold medal. Mount Anderson, which we then thought was the highest peak in Mpumalanga, was the last of the 10 peaks on our list. But it was also the toughest. So for every peak that was selected, I had to get permission to access, because most of these peaks do not have trails, laid out trails to the top, and most of them are situated on private property. So with Mount Anderson, I undertook the arduous task of gaining the necessary permission. I was sent from port to starboard, from the one organization to the next, from the one property owner to the next. And eventually, I was put in touch with Richard Green, the then forestry manager at the Mount Anderson forestry area for the Department of Forestry and Fisheries, who also advised me to get in contact with Komati Land, because the trail overlapped, or their property overlapped the trail. So I needed to get permission from both. Many days later, and almost 200 emails later, we determined that the safest option to reach the summit was via the Fanie Botha hiking trail. Our first group of 6 hikers and mountain enthusiasts set off on the first Sunday in December 2022, with Matthew Hill and Samantha Scott in the lead, with an early start as usual. The WhatsApp from the summit came through just after 10 a.m., with the rest of the group reaching the summit an hour or so later. The second attempt came on the 11th of December 2022 on International Mountain Day, with 4 of us successfully reaching the summit. One of us, an experienced mountain hiker called William Hugo, suffered a serious injury on his way to Stables Hut, and it was on the flat jeep track after we summited Mount Anderson, which also led to the decision that we no longer carry backpacks, but rather opt for a slack packing to accommodate those who are going up to the mountains. At first, we thought that he only pulled a muscle, but after hiking the 11 kilometers back to his vehicle the following morning and driving home to Palabora and a subsequent hospital visit, they discovered that he had in fact sustained a fracture in his femur. He was crowned the Ironman of the Year. In 2023, the peaks in the challenge were increased to 22, which still included Mount Anderson, but we added another peak, Mount Moody, that was also located on the Fanie Botha Trail. In 2023, half of the group successfully reached the summit of peaks. I think there were 12 hikers and 6 of them succeeded. Worth mentioning was the fact that that weekend coincided with the Rugby World Cup final between South Africa and New Zealand. And when they reached Stable's Hut, that evening they watched the final on an iPad, and even though I was not there, I had the pleasure of watching a video of the moment that South Africa won, and it was really an incredible and emotional moment shared between these hikers who also celebrated the fact that they had just summited Mount Anderson. So it was a really special occasion. Also worth mentioning is at that stage, South Africa was experiencing severe load shedding, and many areas, people were complaining that they couldn't watch the final, but these guys on this hike in the middle of nowhere with no electricity could watch it and celebrate with their fellow hikers. It was really special. In 2024, we added another peak to the Summit X Fanie Botha Challenge. This happened as a result of Matthew and Samantha's accidental summit of this particular mountain in 2023, because they believed that that was Mount Moody. I just have to mention as well that even though they missed Mount Moody by a few inches, they went back the following morning to Mount Moody to take a picture at the cairn to say that they've done it, which showed true dedication. They also earned the Recce of the Year title for 2023, and they were the overall winners of Summit X for that year. There were now 4 peaks, including Stanley Bushkop, making it longer and more challenging. Next year, we are hoping to add at least 1 more peak to what is now fast becoming a Golden Escarpment Traverse.
Fanie Botha was a former Minister of Water Affairs and Forestry of South Africa. He had the vision to establish a hiking trail along the Golden Escarpment. Fanie Botha was opened in 1973 with a group of 13 hikers who paid a mere 50 cents a day to do this.
Wow.
It was supposed to be part of a larger network of trails called the National Hiking Way System, stretching across South Africa.
Okay, so it's like the Pacific Crests Trail in the US and the El Camino in Europe and other international continental trails.
That's correct.
Are there any trails that like that in South Africa?
The closest one that I know of is called the Rim of Africa. It starts with the Cederberg section and ends up with the Outeniqua section. It consists of 9 sections, stretching over a distance of 760 kilometers.
Wow, that's impressive.
It'll take you it will take you between 2 and 3 months to do this thing. in one go.
Okay, but you do have the option to do it in sections.
Yes, for sure, because it's quite expensive as a whole as well.
Okay, wow. Yeah, that's really something to put on your bucket list.
Oh, no, for sure.
Fanie Botha Xtreme is in fact a traverse of a section of the Golden Escarpment, which is part of the Drakensberg. But we'll talk about this just now. At 2,272 meters, Mount Anderson was for many years thought to be the highest point in Mpumalanga. But a survey done a few decades ago showed that Die Berg was in fact the highest point. And this is located in the Steenkampsberg range near Dalstroom. Mount Anderson is the 10th most prominent peak in the Drakensberg range. It is the second most prominent in Mpumalanga, with Mariepskop being the first. And it's the 53rd most prominent peak in South Africa out of 14,201 peaks, which makes it quite a significant peak. Mount Anderson's northern Sotho name is Tabachweo, which is also the name of the municipality in the area, and this means White Mountain, which possibly refers to the fact that during our occasional really cold winters, the mountain is covered in snow.
Let's talk about the trail to the summit of Mount Anderson.
Okay, so in part one, we covered the trail from Maritzbos up to the Hartbeesvlakte, which was on day 2. We're not going to talk about that part of the trail because we've covered it. You can go and listen to part 1 if you need to know. We're going to cover the trail from the Kern on the Hartbeesvlakte up to the summit of Mount Anderson.
From the Kern on the Hartbeesvlakte to the summit of Mount Anderson, you go along a 2-track, which includes a couple of switchbacks.
Sure, yeah, that felt like more than a couple of switchbacks.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I think those were approximately 9.
Sure, it felt like it was never going to end, especially after that incline from Maritzbos up to the Hartbeesvlakte, which was already like a grueling trek. The switchbacks between the foot of the mountain and the Hartbeesvlakte felt never ending. I think the distance we covered was about 4 kilometers
That's
to
correct.
the base of the mountain.
That's correct.
Okay. Then, yeah, from there.
From where you leave the 2-track for the footpath, you go along the shoulder of a ridge. You follow the shoulder line up to where you cross actually the ridge. It was about there on the rocky ridge that we left the bags in the shade.
Yeah, there's a rocky ridge where you actually start with the ascent. And we left our bags there because it's very steep to go up to the mountain. It's not a long distance to the summit. It's just incredibly steep. And you don't want to carry any extra weight. So we just took our water with us.
The first section after the trees, the tree line and the rocky ridge is very loose and rocky. So if you are there, just make sure again of your footing.
Yeah, there it's a matter of literally putting one foot in front of the other because it's steep. My calf muscles I could feel them on that uphill. And I would strongly advise using walking poles to go up. It helps a lot.
Especially with balancing, yes.
Yeah. Something that's worth mentioning here is that there is a false summit at this stage. When you look up towards the top of the mountain, it looks like you're very close to the summit, which is in fact just the top of the first incline. Once you get to the top, you still have a whole mountain lying in front of you. So it's very deceptive. And this is why I always tell people that Mount Anderson is 30% fitness, 70% mental
Willpower.
willpower. Yes, that's the word. Willpower. It is. It can break you mentally if you prepare yourself for the summit, and when you get there, you haven't quite reached it yet, and you still have to do a major part. So please be aware of this. Meditate on it if you have to, if you plan to do this with us next year.
After the false summit, or being aware of the false summit, you just follow the ridge line, and approximately after 300 meters, you make a small break to the left of what seems to be the summit. And again, walk on a shoulder there in the shade if it's in the afternoon, until you get to the fire break.
Yes, from the fire break, there's another steep part where you turn towards the mountain, and it's the last stretch. On this last stretch, I literally counted my steps. At first, I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I would take a rest, and then I increased it to 10, and then I increased it to 20, until I got to the top. And when you get to the top, you can actually see the beacon, which is a really welcome sight at this stage, and it gives you an immense sense of accomplishment when you reach the top of Mount Anderson. It was actually named Mount Monster by one of our first summiteers. So it is a tough mountain. I'd say it's by far the toughest summit to reach, especially if you do it the way that we did it, which at this stage is the only legal way to do it. So yeah, no, it's a challenge.
Yes, it's a challenge, but really worth your while once you get to the summit.
Oh yeah,
well.
the view from the top is just incredible. You have a 360 view. You can see the mountains in the distance towards Mount Sheba, and you can also see Formosa Mountain, and beyond towards Marshberg and Mokobolan, which are all part of the Golden Escarpment, but knowing that you are on the highest point on that range is quite incredible.
I just want to note on this last very steep section, you can always also use this for the descent as well, just to make sure of your foot placing step by step. I found it the best method to place your foot on some of these grass knolls and kind of feel it with your weight. Feel how strong it is. If it might be able to hold your weight, just make sure every step of those so that you don't hurt your ankles.
Yeah, a lot of people say that the coming down the mountain is actually the greater challenge, because there is a risk of actually losing your foothold, of spraining an ankle, of knee injury or just general knee pain, which is a general complaint coming down the mountain. But yeah, once we collected our bags, once we got back to the spot where we left our bags, we had to follow the 2-track back to the sign which indicates Stables Hut, which is near the cairn, and then follow that for another 6.3 kilometers.
That's correct.
To Stables Hut, which we've covered in part 2. Mount Moody stands at a height of 2,062 meters, and a large cairn located a few meters off the trail marks the summit. This is the only mountain of the 4 peaks that lie along the Fanie Botha Trail, and for which no detour therefore is necessary. The origin of its name is not clear. After doing a bit of digging, I came across a character by the name of Thomas Moody, whose father was Scottish and whose mother was of Afrikaner origin. Not unlike many of the Scottish settlers. After all, my great-grandmother was a Scot who married an Oosthuizen. Anyway, Moody's grandfather was also the founder of Sedgefield, the town along the garden route. Thomas Moody was a pioneer who led a trek to Shaunaland, now Zimbabwe, during the Great Trek of the 1800s. He sadly succumbed to blackwater fever and lies buried near the Birchenough Bridge near Chimanimani, which we will be visiting in October to climb Montabinga. I assumed that this was the same Moody that the mountain was named after, but upon further investigation I discovered that he led the trek via Zeerust, which is further west near the Botswana border. Nevertheless, the name is quite apt, as the weather on the mountain is quite unpredictable and windy. The day we reached the cairn, we almost missed it due to the shroud of mist which covered the mountain. This is possibly how Matt and Sam missed the cairn and mistook McDonaldsburg for Moody in 2023. Thanks to their mistake, we had another peak to add to the traverse.
At a height of 2,107 meters, McDonaldsburg towers over what was known as the Macmac Diggings. The Macmac Diggings are located near Pilgrim's Rest and is an historical site of the country's first gold rush. It became important after being discovered by Thomas McLaughlin and his partners in 1872, which started a gold rush in the area. As mentioned in part 1, President Burger visited the area, saw the many Scottish prospectors, and suggested it be called Macmac. In 1873, rich gold deposits were discovered by Alex Patterson in Pilgrim's Creek, which made the proclamation as a goldfield official. The nearby Macmac Falls originally had one stream, but with the continuous use of dynamite, it was changed into 2 distinct streams.
McDonaldsburg is located between Mount Moody and Macmac Hut, and you cannot miss it because it has a number of telecommunication towers at the summit. To reach the summit, you have to go to the top of a small hill via a fire break, a rocky fire break. On this small hill, there are 2 distinct cairns, and then once you get to the other side of the hill, you'll see the trail on the left that goes up towards the actual mountain. Okay, you follow this trail to the mountain, over another rocky ridge, and then you'll see the 2-track, which in turn leads to the cement road, which takes you straight to the summit. On the day that we climbed, there was a thick cloud of mist that descended upon the mountain. But by the time we reached the summit, it had cleared sufficiently so that we could take a clear photo at the beacon. The beacon is located between the towers, and please be aware that there are cameras at the towers. Once you come down from the summit, you walk along the 2-track again over the rocky ridge, and this time you don't go over the first hill, but you take the path, which is a clear path, to the left around the hill, and you just follow it. You'll see it lies along the edge of a pine plantation, and at one stage there's a steep downhill from where you'll see the actual trail at the bottom. So you go down, you'll have to climb down, and then you can just follow the trail straight to Mac Hut. The last of the 4 peaks on our Fanie Botha Xtreme is Stellenboschkop, which we have referred to as the bonnet in the past, but this is incorrect. The bonnet is in fact a small hill that is located right next to the parking area with a sign of the same name. The trail starts out along a steep footpath, and it eventually reaches a forestry road where you turn left, follow the road for about 200 to 300 meters until you get to the pylons on the right. Here you leave the road, you get up, climb up the embankment, and there's no footpath, but you just walk towards the mountain, which you can see from there, through the grass, towards the old wagon trail, which is visible from the forestry road. Once you get to the wagon trail, you take a right and you follow the trail until you get to another path that goes up on the left, over a hill, and then the last stretch to the top of the mountain, and you'll see the beacon when you get close. It is not a difficult hike, it's not a long hike, but it is quite steep. It's about 4 kilometers in total, and the view from the top of the mountain is one of my favorites of that area. You get a clear view of Graskop and God's window, and the view is rewarding, especially at sunrise or sunset. Yeah, so that's the last mountain. The reason why we actually did this from the parking area. So just to clarify, we did not hike there along Fanie Botha. The Fanie Botha trail goes past Stellenboschkop, but that's about a 13-kilometer hike from Mac Hut. So if you are doing the 5-day option for Fanie Botha, that's great. But because we were doing the 4-day option, which ended on the Sunday, and many of our hikers needed to get back to Gauteng, we ended the hike at President Burger, then drove along the road to Stanley Bushkop, and from there we went up to the mountain. This concludes our 2-part podcast on the Fanie Botha Xtreme, also known as the Golden Escarpment Traverse. We hope you enjoyed listening and invite you to like this podcast and subscribe to our channel to receive updates on our latest episodes. Join us next week when we chat about 3 provinces, Mokhobulan and Mariepskop. For the love of mountains, always.